Welcome to Fearless Wild Creative, a podcast for those who want to be led by confidence, guided by creativity, and grounded in nature. I'm artist and designer Meghan Aileen. I have spent decades turning creative vision into a way of life. Each episode blends metaphor, story, knowledge, and practical tools. Whether you're growing your courage, your creative voice, your work, or your connection to nature, you belong here. Hey folks, and welcome to the first ever creative episode of this podcast. If you don't already know, in this show, each week we have a theme of either fearless, wild, or creative. And this is the first creative episode of the show. And I'm really excited about this because this is really the main pillar of what I feel like is who I am and how I can contribute to the world. And this episode in particular is for all of you that have ever found themselves paralyzed by and frustrated by their own inner gremlins, even though you wish you could just be creating with that Bob Ross kind of peace. And we have all been there, right? Whether you're creating a painting, it could be a song or something you're writing. It could even be playing a sport or a project at work. And those damn gremlins are on your shoulder saying things like, that isn't good, and so did that much better, and no one will like this, and I suck, and what's the point, etc. And we all have had these gremlins at some point. And I think that these gremlins come from a few places, and there's different versions of them. Like some are more normal, and I think part of the process and part of that like creative process. And when you're pushing yourself to another level, then they show up, and that's part of that fear stuff that we talked about in the first Fearless episode. But it's that amygdala, putting that out there for you. So some of them I think are more normal, and then some of them are meaner and come from like some trauma or programming. And some of those meaner ones could come from like early conditioning from school or your parents or productivity culture. And maybe your parents or your teacher told you that something you made wasn't good at a point, or they didn't understand it. Or maybe your work got rejected at an early age when you were still very vulnerable, and that became like a permanent narrative for you. You might even just have some unrealistic expectations for yourself or hold yourself to a standard of perfection, which none of us can ever reach. Maybe your family didn't put value on creating in general, and this is fairly common, especially in generations that had to deal with the Great Depression or World War II. It's like they had these bigger survival things to deal with, and we as humans don't create for the sake of creating in survival mode very well. And maybe your family just grew up without much, and creating was seen as a luxury that couldn't be afforded because of either time or cost or whatever. So those are some of the places that I feel like these gremlins come from. And a lot of our modern culture today in general doesn't really value creativity just for the sake of creating either. Many cultures throughout history have, but 2025 in the US of A seems like unless you are making money or doing something to solve a problem or something quote unquote productive, it doesn't have real value. So then speaking of our society, I do think that some of the gremlins come from the more analytical brain circuits that are overactive because of our society. There has been this common belief since the 1960s that our left brain is the more analytical, language-based, logical, task-oriented, etc., and our right brain is more creative, visual-based, free-flowing ideas, and all of that. And while there is some truth to this, in reality, it's not that simple. What we do know, though, is that there are circuits in our brains that, and areas of our brains that are responsible for those functions, but they do, however, overlap in function and entwine the left and the right hemispheres. They communicate with each other for things, especially like creative problem solving requires multiple circuits in your brain to accomplish that, and they are on both hemispheres. But regardless of the specific neuroscience, the takeaway for this purpose of our discussion today is that our analytical parts of our brain, our logic, language-driven, risk-adverse areas are the parts that keep you on task and organized every day. And these are the parts of our brain that we use most of the time in our daily society. It's what gets you to places on time and helps you complete tasks and all of that. All of those things happen to be my nemesis, but those circuits in general do get a lot of exercise in our normal daily life, just due to the nature of how our society works. So then there's the parts of our brain, the circuits that are more visual and sensory and emotional, seeing patterns, feeling flow, finding beauty in things. And these parts tend to prefer symbols to words, and they light up when you're doing something that is free-flowing versus those structured systems that our society loves. So to keep things simple and illustrate this for those of us that like visual metaphors and stories, I like to say that when we are in the process of creation, these parts of our brain manifest into what I think of as those angry little gremlins versus Bob Ross. Because what is the opposite of angry, negative gremlin? It's Bob Ross, right? Everybody loves to watch Bob Ross paint, and there is a reason for this. He is calm, he is peaceful, he exudes creative flow. Happy accidents are not an issue. They just morph into something else. And for people in our culture that are drained by an overactive analytical and logical brain, Bob just feels good to watch. And when one part of your brain is active, the other ones are turned down. So that gives us some relief. And since we all want that balance, he gives us a taste of that just watching him paint. I mean, the man has millions of views on YouTube, like millions, not just from artists. It's everyone that wants to watch him. And I personally have a very special place in my heart and my career for Mr. Ross. He actually is the one that taught me to paint when I was just 8 years old. I mean, not personally, I'm not that special, unfortunately, but he is the one, he's one of the reasons that I love and still paint landscapes. And I used to set up in our dingy, dark basement with oil paints, which is still what I use today. When I was 8 years old. And yes, turpentine in an enclosed basement for a child, probably not the best idea. But I did set up a little TV and I painted along with him, and I would get so frustrated that I couldn't complete it in 30 minutes like he did. I was hard on myself even then, and those gremlins have been around a long time. But his calming nature kept me grounded, and it kept me coming back to the process. And I'm grateful for that because that is very important. And the habits in his process were visual storytelling, nature imagery, which we are all deeply connected to. And it's an emotion-led process, like for the sake of the process is what comes across from him. Just like we talked about in the first Fearless episode, whichever circuits or pathways of your brain are getting more exercise become the stronger ones. And like I mentioned too, that we all get so much exercise of those analytical parts just living daily life. So it is a good idea if you want to be more creative to specifically try to exercise those circuits that are more like the Bob Ross. And there are some exercises that can help you with getting out of that analytical circuit area of your brain and activate those calming circuits that let creativity flow instead of criticizing it. And I do want to do a future episode that talks just about these exercises, but today I just want to talk about it a little bit differently. And I want to give you some options of things that you can do to try to give Bob Ross a little more power and take it away from those gremlins when we are creating. But first of all, I want to assure you that if you are at times when you're creating things, no matter what it is, and in that moment you think this sucks, it's probably because you're doing it right. And I'm going to repeat that. It means that you are doing it right. If you are not creating what you believe is crap at certain times and you love everything that you do, you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. And that's part of the process. It's how we grow. It's how we go beyond the boundaries and the plateaus that we have already reached. It's similar to how you don't set goals in your business and reach them all of the time. Because if you do, you're doing that wrong. You need to set them higher and strive towards those higher goals, right? That's how we grow. And creating it's similar. If you don't experiment and push and try new things, you'll never go beyond what you are already good at. And we want to, right? I mean, we all want to evolve and get better. And I'm sure you look at things that you did or created 10 years ago and are like, what was I thinking? And that's good. That's how it works. And there's probably some things you're proud of too. I'm not saying you should hate everything you did in the past, but what I am saying is that if you are playing it safe and only creating things that you know you are good at, then you're limiting yourself and your creativity to that level. So first, you could just tell the gremlins that. Tell them to F off because it's all part of the process and it's fine. It's all good. I am on track. tell them you got this, and if you didn't fail at times, you would be stuck at one level. So, and there's a variety of variations of mantras that you can tell them. It's just part of the process. I'm on track. I can create like no one is watching. It's okay to play and not always perform. I mean, there's things like that. You can tell yourself all of these kind of mantras that in that moment that could help you just to kind of get past that. And so just try telling them whatever version of those mantras works for you, like whatever kind of counters that voice in your head that they're telling you, but don't expect it to work completely on the first try. You do have to do it kind of repeatedly to retrain them and your brain. Okay, so then second, if this is happening more than not for you, I mean, it could be a skill issue. So maybe there's a skill that you don't have that you need. If you want to paint flowers and your flowers consistently look like dogs, it might be a technique issue. And if you're getting stuck writing songs in the same place every time, there might be something you need to learn about the songwriting process. But that's not a problem because you can learn technique. You can learn those new skills and go find somebody that teaches that skill, that is good at that skill, and you can learn from them. So it also really helps to get outside of yourself and your creating bubble and talk to other creators and share what you're doing and be vulnerable and ask for help. I see a lot of creators that are just number one, they don't want to share what they're doing. So they just stay stuck in their little bubble and they can't get past a certain point because it's very hard for us to just operate in our own little creative bubble because of things like these gremlins and because of the fact that we might have a skill issue that we can't see ourselves. Okay, so that's the first two. And then third, I think that it's really helpful to just all try to channel our inner Bob Ross. When you are in that creative process, think, what would Bob do? He would probably turn that happy little accident into something intentional. He would probably let his intuition guide him as to where to put that tree. He would probably enjoy the process and not just the result. He would focus on the fact that he is enjoying representing nature and all of her beauty versus criticizing himself in that moment. He would pivot or make it work in real time. He would be happy to just be doing something that he loves. And that is what I want for all of us. I want us to create without worrying about mistakes. I want us to remember that failure is an important part of the process and that messiness and mistakes are part of the process. I want us to recognize that when we do need more skills, to feel proud of our work and to go learn them because you can definitely go learn them. And I also want us to all have squirrels on our shoulder while we paint. But that one might be a little bit ambitious, but we're talking about aiming for things that are out of reach, right? So to sum up, first, it is normal to have those little gremlins when we are creating and pushing ourselves beyond our current level. In fact, it is part of the process. So you remind yourself that likely means you're pushing beyond what you know you're good at. Talk to the gremlins with intentional mantras, repeatedly telling them that this is part of the process and it doesn't mean I suck. And then number two, if you are missing a skill that's keeping you stuck at a certain level or from doing something you want to do, determine what that skill is and find somebody to teach you how to do that. And number three, channel your inner Bob Ross. What would Bob do? Remind yourself it can sometimes just be about the process and not the results. That productivity is not the only thing of value in life. That there is value in creating for the sake of creating. There is value in that process. Okay, my friends, thank you so much for being here. I really hope this was helpful for you, and I would love to hear from you on Instagram at Meghan Aileen. Come join me over there and tell me about your gremlins and where you are at and what would help you. And until next time, be fearless, wild, and creative. All right, folks, thank you so much for listening. If you're curious, you can find my paintings and all my creative tools on my website at meghanaileen.com. If you feel like you could use some one-on-one creative consulting or coaching to reach your goals, you can book a time with me. I would love to talk to you. You can also join us in my masterclass where I teach you how to create magical rentable spaces on your own property. Visit styleforprofit.com or just come connect with me on Instagram at Meghan Aileen. If today's episode sparked something, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who might appreciate it. Until next time, be fearless, wild, and creative.